Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to get into a really specific, interesting angle on parenting, particularly around kids identified as gifted.
Right.
And our source for this is Parenting the Gifted Child, Avoiding Common Traps.
A very useful guide.
Yeah, definitely. So our goal today, our mission, is to sort of unpack one particular pitfall, something parents might easily stumble into, and really understand what that means for the child involved.
And it's important to start by saying, look, feeling proud of your child, especially a gifted one, that's completely natural. It's good.
You should be proud.
That joy, that pride, it's a positive thing, fundamentally.
Totally understandable. But okay, the source immediately points out this common parent trap that can kind of spring up right alongside that natural pride. So what is this trap we're talking about? Why is it so easy to miss?
Well, the thing is, it feels so innocent at first.
Yeah.
The authors say it's, very easy to talk nonstop about your little genius. Parents get excited. They want to share these amazing things their kid is doing with, well, everyone. Family, friends, maybe even people they barely know.
Yeah, I can totally picture that. You're bursting with pride. You want to shout it from the rooftops, almost.
Exactly. It just feels like celebrating.
But the warning here is that the same behavior can be very stressful on your child. So how does that happen? How does sharing good news become, well, stressful?
It really boils down to expectations, doesn't it? When parents show them off too much, it subtly, or maybe not so subtly, creates expectations that they may not be able to live up to.
Right, like a performance demand.
Yeah, precisely. Imagine constantly feeling like you have to be the genius, For this invisible audience of everyone your parents talk to, every new situation, every new person, it's another test.
I see. So the focus shifts. It's less about, the joy of learning something new.
And more about performing for approval.
Yeah.
Getting that validation.
That pressure alone sounds like a lot. But the source goes deeper, suggesting this can actually create a false sense of self for your child. Now, that sounds serious. What are we talking about long-term there?
Yeah, that's a really critical point. A false sense of self. It essentially means the child starts to believe their worth is their accomplishments, not who they are deep down.
So, I'm only valuable if I'm achieving.
Exactly. They might think they're only loved, only accepted when they're hitting those high marks or doing something impressive. That external praise becomes everything. They lose touch with their own internal compass, what they actually care about, what they find interesting, regardless of praise.
Wow.
It's like they start living for the applause, not for themselves. And the source is pretty blunt about the potential outcomes if this goes unchecked. It says you could end up with a driven perfectionist child, or perhaps a dropout, or worse.
Perfectionist or dropout, those are really opposite ends of the spectrum, aren't they? Stemming from the same root cause.
It makes sense, though, right? Either they chase that external validation relentlessly, burning themselves out as perfectionists, or they just give up. They disengage entirely because the pressure is too much, or the whole game feels inauthentic.
Okay, so if this bragging habit is so natural, maybe even instinctive for proud parents, but the downsides are potentially huge, what's the advice? How do parents avoid falling into this trap?
The guidance is actually quite practical. It's about containment, really. The source says it is extremely important to limit your bragging behavior to your very close friends or your parents.
So specific people, not just anyone.
Right. A tight circle. A safe space where, yes, you can share that joy and pride, but it's contained. It doesn't put the weight of public expectation onto the child. It separates the parent's feelings from the child's need to develop their own authentic sense of self away from the spotlight.
Creating a boundary, essentially.
Precisely. A necessary boundary for healthy development. Yeah.
So the big takeaway here, letting the child build that authentic self, separate from just their achievements by being really mindful about who hears the bragging.
That's the core message, yeah. That's crucial.
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with this thought then. If this trap is fairly common, and maybe many of us have seen it, or perhaps even done it, what kind of broader impact could that have? If a significant number of really capable people are either pushed into being perfectionists, maybe anxious ones, or they check out entirely, all because of this early pressure, it really makes you think, how do we best foster genuine potential, not just performance? What does that really look like?